can. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maryanne Steidinger, and for those of you that don't know me, I work for Invensys, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing for their software products. Those are Invensys, SimSci-Escore, and Wonderware. And as Roy said, I'm responsible for some of the social media marketing that we do for Invensys. What that means is that, and I'll take just a little bit of background if that's okay.
Sure.
So about a year ago, we decided that we wanted to get more active in social media. And what we did is we actually assigned a person in our corporate marketing group to manage the social media process. We came up with a set of requirements. We came up with a set of standards so that anyone that had a Twitter or a LinkedIn or a blog account had to be somewhat responsible in the way in which they were going to execute those. Make sure that they were professional, make sure that they kind of reflected the company values. And then what we did is we set up a series of blogs that were hosted by subject matter experts. So for example, I have one on operations management, there's one on SimSci-Escore, and they are directed at really different audiences. SimSci-Escore is mostly engineering that reads it. Mine happens to be much broader. But that's what we're doing for social media. So we're really trying to kind of take all of those different aspects, including things like search engine optimization for the web, and really create a voice in the industry for who Invensys is, what we stand for, and education for our customers.
Hi, this is Gary Mintchell, and I once upon a time worked for a living in manufacturing and became a journalist and helped found Automation World. And about 3-4 weeks ago, suddenly got the urge to, things were going on kind of stayed stable, and I thought, stable isn't good. So I want to try new ideas and use some of these ideas. John and I talked for years now, I think, and I thought it's time to try some new ideas in media. So that's why you see a different name up there, AutomationDaily, which is a placeholder for new ideas I'm trying in publications. Roy asked me to talk from the it's kind of weird, the media standpoint of social media, so go parse those words. And a couple of things, I've been exploring this a long time. I view all this as self-publishing. So I was a blogger. I started studying that in the early 2000s, and by 2003 I started a blog, which today is called Gary Mintchell's Feed Forward, and will morph, or pivot as they say in Silicon Valley, into some more interesting things, I hope. And that was a self-publishing. So I started out, people just said, oh, today, it was called a web blog, and it was a self-publishing. I could go out and just say, today I walked the dog and had a cup of coffee, and I will write a letter, and tomorrow I'll do this. And eventually it kind of became a communications medium, and it generated comments back, so it was a little bit of social aspect, and it lasted for quite a while. And actually the blogs still exist. The things that Invensys has done are very interesting, the way they've bound them together and started to bring them all together. So I use the blog to start out doing that sort of thing, and then along come other things, and they come, as John says, faster and faster and faster. So Twitter comes along, and how do we use Twitter? Well, originally we used Twitter as a communications medium. I would put out a thing and say, I'm going to write an article on something, and all the PR people would write back to me. But now I use Twitter totally differently as a link blog. So I find interesting things and I send it out and say, here's something interesting I found that John wrote, and here's a link to it, and that sort of thing. And you also use it to link back to you. Here's something I just wrote that you might find interesting because da-da-da, and send it out. So Twitter is morphing that way, and I see some publications starting to use it that way also, as kind of an outbound way of attracting people to come in, and then hopefully, if they study John's stuff, their website would be good enough to attract them to stay, and that sort of thing. So, as they all have said, this stuff moves so quickly you have to stay up. I have seen Twitter used at least 3 different ways in the last 5 years or so, and it's just amazing. And then Facebook comes along, and I'm with Roy. I'm on Facebook. You can find me if you want, but I'm boring. Well, I'm boring regardless. But anyway, Facebook is not catching on quite as fast, although if you're in consumers, I don't know how it works for B2B, but the consumer people, marketing people say that it really works wonderfully as a way to reach consumers, get people to like you and all that kind of stuff. LinkedIn is interesting. Now, LinkedIn ties to me, the way they're talking about it, to a group. Now, I think I recognize a few people, so you might have got some programmers out here. You may have heard of Stack Overflow. Well, you may know in programming what a Stack Overflow is, but regardless of that, there's a website called Stack Overflow, and it's a question and answer thing, and you get points for asking good questions, and then points for giving good answers, and it's all about programming, and it's way cool, and I really wanted to do that at Automation World and never could get it up, but because it's very difficult. So LinkedIn starts out just as like a Rolodex, you know, the old-fashioned Rolodex business card thing, and then they come up with groups, and so you can get in a group, and that started out as question and answer things. So if you've been on it very long, and this is all, what, 3 years? I don't know, not very long. So all of a sudden, everybody's got groups. I'm a member of, I think, 41 groups. I can't keep track of them. But they're all interesting and they're very focused. So it starts out like a Q&A. I've got a question on something and people write in with the answer, and it builds a community. But now I'm seeing an awful lot of these sites becoming posting things. So if I post something on my blog, I send it out on Twitter, I post it on LinkedIn saying, oh, go back to my website and see what I just wrote. Oh, and by the way, Google+, which some people diss and some people aren't sure about it, but it's growing in effectiveness, and then what you do is you post it on there. So if you're doing, I'm not really sure I like the term content marketing. If you're doing that, so you write, so like Maryanne writes some interesting stuff for her company. So if you use all those different ways to attract different people, come back into your site, it can all work together. And some media companies are starting to do it. Automation World is doing some of that stuff. There's a magazine I know called Design World that uses an awful lot of Twitter instead of email to send out and say, hey, come look at this thing that we're doing, and that sort of thing. But it moves so quickly. It's so quickly that you just have to like evaluate almost constantly. So that's a little bit about media and a little bit about, I've tried all these things and I'm still trying them, and now I'm going to build a business on all of it, so we'll see how it goes.
And one thing I'd like to follow up on, Gary, and one of the things people ask us is, especially with the blogs, well, how do you find content? And I went to a social media conference last month, and what they said is, if you have to think about finding content, you shouldn't have a blog. So it should be relatively easy for you. Now, I don't agree with that. However, what I found is there's some tricks that you can use in order to kind of populate your blog content, or even LinkedIn groups. One of the things that I found is that the LinkedIn groups are very subject specific. So for example, I participated in one called Intelligent Oil Well Fields. I'm not an oil and gas person, but they had a conversation on the cloud, and was it going to be applicable for SCADA and other things like that. Well, the cloud I know a little bit about, so I was able to contribute to that. Then I thought, well, you know what, that'd be a great blog content. So then we went about and we wrote a couple of articles. I did, the guy on SimSci Escort did. And so what you find is that it's kind of self-feeding, that these discussions and, as Gary said, articles in magazines like Automation World will give you ideas on which direction to go, and more importantly, like what people find valuable. I mean, the whole idea is what we're trying to do is provide education for our customers, for people that aren't customers, for my LinkedIn friends, but it's all about creating a dialogue. It's all about finding your own voice and then making sure that kind of resounds and is valuable to people.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'd like to open it up to any questions from the floor.
I figured you guys put in lots of time and thought in your presentation, so I should do something here. So my name is Doug Lutz. I'm with Nova Chemicals. In my company, we don't block LinkedIn, but we do block Facebook and we block YouTube. And we do that to protect the bandwidth, and we do that to reduce our vulnerability to virus attacks, so reduce that vector, and prevent the streaming. And we also do it to prevent what we sometimes view as maybe a productivity waster. So I was wondering if you have comments on how prevalent is that type of policy out there, and do you have any opinions as to whether that is even applicable in today's environment, and just throw away the security concerns and the streaming concerns and treat it as not a productivity waster, but if someone is actually doing some of this stuff inappropriately, treat that as a discipline issue.
Let me take that first as a continuing education standpoint. ARC, for instance, generates lots of YouTube videos that we put out there for education purposes. We're videoing right now. This will be on our YouTube channel. So we're focusing on generating lots of content, as lots of other companies are, for education purposes. And to block something like YouTube may be the right thought in terms of bandwidth issues that you're concerned with, but in the long run, you're actually cutting out the ability to learn from something like a YouTube channel. But as John pointed out earlier, mobile devices are filling the gap. So most companies at this point have BYOD policies, bring your own device policies, and employees will just find other connections for seeking out that kind of information. And those are things that are difficult to block. But John, go ahead.
Back in the early days of telephones, companies were mortified at the idea of putting a telephone on somebody's desk for exactly the same reason. They don't need, that's going to interfere with their job. We don't want these distraction devices there. And, as Roy pointed out, every day there are more and more legitimate uses for YouTube, and I think myself, at least once a day, I'll do a Google search to try to solve some problem. It might be trying to figure out how to do something in PowerPoint. It might be, something, along a much more technical line, has something to do with configuring a feedback loop or something like that. And more, the answers are in tutorials that are in a YouTube video. So you're definitely, in my opinion, handicapping your employees' ability to do their job by blocking those things. But what you're also doing is fooling yourself. Because of these smartphones that everybody has, for you to think that just because you block Facebook, that they're not going to spend any time on Facebook is absurd.
There is I recognize the bandwidth problem, and I think that's been retarded a little bit, the amount of usage of YouTube. I forgot to mention I'm on YouTube too. You try everything, but bandwidth is a problem. Even for me at home, where my home office is sometimes. But for a company, if you're an IT manager, you probably sweat that like all the time. And an interesting conversation I had this week was, I don't know if you're familiar with Twitter, and then they bought this company and they came out with the Vine, so the Twitter Vine. So that's right now you use it for like a 6-second, it's almost like one of those GIF things, but it's a 6-second repeating video. But that's not the cool thing. The cool thing is that within Twitter, which is a small, bandwidth thing, you can put a video. So now we have a technology that's being exploited and developed. You know how technology goes. Once you develop it for one thing, engineers, I sat in a press conference and somebody presented something new, and immediately I said, oh, and now can you use it for this and this and this and this and this? And I said, whoa, yeah, eventually, and so think about Vine, and maybe that will help this whole YouTube phenomenon so that you can get the training. There's a tremendous amount of training out there on video. And it'll help both ways. And then there's always the employee trust thing. If you're worried about them being on Facebook, well, personal productivity would say work in a 90-minute burst and take a break. So if you work in a 90-minute focused burst and then take a break and check your Facebook friends, that's not all that bad, according to me.
Okay, next question.
There's an old expression, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And if you look at the composition of any organization, you have, older down to younger individuals in your organization. Younger individuals are very fast to adopt all these new social media technologies. The older employees, very, very reluctant to do so. I mean, you have a few outliers, but those are probably the exception. So how do you move an entire organization forward? How do you teach an old dog new tricks?
Go ahead, Maryanne.
I can certainly talk about Invensys because we, like you've just described, we have a whole host of people that have been there very long periods of time. So prior to social media really coming about, and then the youngsters that are coming on, that it's a very natural way for them to get information is by looking at smartphone or looking at data on the smartphones, going to Twitter, going to LinkedIn, and the whole idea is to make that part of your culture. And so, for example, we created something that's called iShare, and it's basically a blog that's internal that's presenting information to employees. And so you're basically telling them you have to go to this venue in order to really find out what's going on with the company. It's like a company newsletter, but it's a real-time feed. So it's a way in which to kind of orient the company to look at new ways of presenting information. So besides the corporate newsletters that we have, we've got a iTube feed, which are basically Invensys videos that are internal. And that's one of the ways in which to do it. The other way is that, again, we've taken these social or subject matter experts, and these could be people that have been there for 40 years or people that have been there for 3 years, but we've asked them to be the people that are writing our blogs. And so again, it starts to just integrate people into that technology. Personally, I'm on the older versus the younger side, and from a marketing perspective, I love social media because it's free. Because working with a magazine or doing a lot of other types of advertising, it costs money. Social media just costs you your time. So it takes 15, 20 minutes to write a blog post. It takes 5 minutes to read a story and then post it on LinkedIn and say, hey, you guys might find this interesting. So what I'd recommend to everybody is start to do that kind of stuff, because it doesn't take much time. You're educating folks, and it gets everyone kind of involved in really what's coming up next and what's just going to be exploding.
I think you're probably right. If you expose people to it, I mean, I'm looking at 60 in the rearview mirror, and I'm still playing with all this stuff, but maybe I'm an outlier, like you said. But my wife is like totally non-technical, but these things are getting very interesting. Now, she'll never get on Facebook, and I really don't like Facebook that much. But so she had an iPad before I had an iPad. I wasn't sure about a business use of it several years ago when it first came out, but I bought her one for an anniversary or a significant something, and she adapted to it right away. It's the Steve Jobs vision of here's a computing device with a lot of power that it doesn't take a computer science degree to use, and so she just jumps right on it. I mean, I put when my mom was in her late 70s or early 80s, she picked up email and started conversing with all her extended family. It happens, it's just, but I think you're on the right track, Maryanne. If you put it in front of the people and give them the incentive and just say start playing with it. And there's always something, it's like I talked to a company who just implemented lean manufacturing, and the older people thought it was a threat to their jobs, and basically you put it out there, you start it out, you say you're not going to get fired, and let them start getting into the system, and eventually it adopts.
I think mentoring is an important part of that too. Mentoring and reverse mentoring. So in other words, pairing together baby boomers and millennials and allowing them to help each other out, because the way I look at it is you've got the baby boomers and millennials are on two extremes, right? The boomers are extremely averse to sharing. So that's why they don't tend to gravitate towards things like Facebook or Twitter. They don't understand it. They don't get it. Millennials are the complete opposite, right? They overshare. They have no boundaries, and to a degree that gets them in a lot of trouble. And so I think that they can help each other out. There's a happy medium, right? There's a degree of sharing that is very helpful, both from a personal perspective and from an organizational perspective. And there's a degree of sharing that's detrimental to both the organization and the person. So maybe if you can pair people up, then they can help move each other more towards the center.
I'd like to give a little background, continuing the thought of mentoring. Just a little personal story. My mother's 78 years old. 2 years ago, I bought her a little netbook. I thought she'd want to go on Google and just search around, enjoy the internet. And it didn't work. The battery was constantly dead. She just wasn't getting it. It sat most of the time. Less than a year ago, I created a Facebook account for her, and I connected her to her grandchildren. And she's on that every day now, just to see the pictures, just to get the social updates, to see what her grandkids are doing, to see what the family's doing. She's now reaching out to other friends that she hasn't seen in years. She still doesn't know how to operate the netbook, but she knows where that one icon is. And that reinforces a little bit of mentoring, where you spend some time, you show the value that a device can deliver, and there will be progress. You just have to make the right connection. Yes. Hold on, we've got the microphone.
First of all, I want to thank the presenters and the panelists for this exciting session. I was wondering whether I should attend this or some of the more relevant topics like industry standards and stuff like that. So this was really good. Lot of discussion today was about external communication, about marketing. Now, I don't think we have solved the problem of internal communication within the organizations. And I have not seen Facebook for enterprises being common yet. We have technologies, I mean, no offense to IBM, but my company uses Lotus. And it gives some tools, but not as effective. What are your thoughts on using technology, what we saw today, for internal communication?
I mean, I could address that. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that Invensys, which is, an industrial automation company, uses YouTube in order to do training, in order to do corporate updates. We have newsletters. We have, we call them collaboration sites, and they are subject specific. So for example, we've got, I'll call it like a LinkedIn group for workflow. Now, I'm a product marketing person, so basically what we do from product marketing is we put stuff out there that we talk about new customer wins we've had, maybe system integrators that are now working on the product, maybe some people will post issues, like, I'm trying to program this device to do this, do you have any ideas? And then it could be as diverse as, hey, here's some pictures of my vacation. But the idea is that, again, it's taking these channels, this media that's already available, and Facebook. We do have a Facebook account, and I think they've got like 1,600 followers on it. But everybody's absolutely right. I personally don't use Facebook for business. I keep work and state kind of separate. But really, we're using social media internally to continue to educate, to update, and as everybody was saying, to get people familiar and comfortable with those new kinds of ways of getting information out.
And once again, innovation takes over. Once an idea comes out, you build on it. Last year, in the room across the hallway here, I met a company, a British company by the name of Sabisu, or something like that. And so they looked at the Facebook interface. So they said, oh, okay, this is kind of a cool interface and we can do this. Let's build a collaboration tool for either internal to a company or a company and its partners. So if you're maybe supply chain or maybe design engineering and or whatever it might be, so it's private internal, but it's a Facebook-like interface, so I can use the ideas of a Facebook and make it more of a company-wide thing. And I think you'll see more of that kind. People have been doing collaboration tools now for quite some time, but they're picking up these ideas from people like Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on. I think you'll see more of that, and I think they could be very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more companies use existing social networks for internal collaboration. So in some instances, they're using Facebook groups to communicate with one another and Facebook messaging. I've got one client that doesn't send me emails anymore. We do all of our communication by Facebook messaging. I've got another client of mine who they have a private LinkedIn group that they use as a collaboration tool to share information and talk out problems, because they've got 7 offices spread across North America. So that's a tool that they use for collaboration. So, as Gary said, there are new technologies that are coming out to provide solutions for creating brand new internal social networking tools. But you can also leverage existing social networks in a closed, private environment to foster that kind of collaboration.
Well,